Hello, everyone. How's it going? This is my third session today. Uh, well, between time zones, I'm pretty sure it would have changed, but at least in GMT, third session, right? That's so much, I feel. But at the same time, it has been really rewarding, definitely, trying to start from scratch. So, with that, I welcome you all again to the third session of learning HTML, CSS, JavaScript by building mini projects. And while I would not lie that this has been slightly slower than I expected it to be, we are kind of nearing to the last bit of our first project, okay, the Pomodoro Timer. So let's spend some time into finishing this one and then we'll start a new one. And in that, I'm pretty sure we would be able to finish two projects in the next 2 hours. I'll wait for folks to join. Meanwhile, if I may request you all to please register for the session if you haven't already. The link is in the chat. So please do register for the session if you haven't already. If you want to follow along right now and this is your first time joining this, then you can find all the code that we have done till now in the GitHub repository. The link is again in the chat. So all you need to do is, again, depending on what you want to do, multiple ways. One is forking the repository. You can create a fork of this repository. That ways you'll have the same code that I am pushing. You can sync the fork and you'll have your own copy of the repository. The other option is if you clone the repository, make changes locally, but don't push it because, well, if you're cloning it, you're basically trying to change things on my user, which, well, you wouldn't be able to, right? So yeah, or you can just download it as a zip, make changes locally and push it to your own GitHub. That's also an option. Okay, downloading as a zip. So with that, let me give you a very quick overview of what we have done till now and then we'll get back to building things. So yeah, there we go. Yeah. So what have we done till now? So we actually started with a very basic index.html, which we have some text there, we have some code there. We went over what are tags in HTML. Then we went over some CSS about how do I style stuff and what are class selectors, ID selectors, how to be more specific to things. Bunch of those things. Then we started our first project, which is a Pomodoro timer. For someone who is not aware of what is a Pomodoro timer, it's kind of a technique where you work for 25 minutes, have a short break of 5 minutes, work for 25 minutes again, have a short break, helps you with your productivity. And I thought, why not build something similar for ourselves, right? So that's a project that we have started building. The first one is Pomodoro Timer. We added some CSS for it as well, the HTML, and we had just started the JS. So in the last two sessions, this is where we have reached. Our ultimate goal for these sessions, I would say, is to build 4 projects, which would be the Pomodoro Timer, the Box Shadow Generator, the library, like my kind of your own library page where you can keep a track of all the books that you have read. And finally, the expense tracker, which would be partially a learning project for you. So, kind of a take home, try it out. And then at the end of it, I will push what I have. And that ways you can kind of, compare, right? You can kind of compare what you are doing, what I have done, what you could have done better. We'll set some ground rules about what is expected in the expense tracker, but yeah, I would say this would be a feel free to work your magic kind of product. kind of project. So yeah, that is, I guess, a very brief introduction to what we have been doing. Now let's get started. I am going to start by going live on our very nice server that we have here. And now over to Pomodoro Timer. This is where we had reached when we went on our break. Okay, so before going on break, this is where we had reached, and it looks like it should work, but it isn't, because there's no functionality, there's no JavaScript to add interactivity. So that is what we are going to focus on right now, and we'll take this one a bit slower. But with the box shadow generator, the JavaScript is really less. HTML is fine, CSS should be quick enough. If depending on the time, I will pre-write some CSS, and yeah, we'll take it from there. Okay, so let me go away from my screen so you can focus solely on the screen, and now let's get over to the interactivity part. Yep, perfect. So true. And it's okay if you haven't watched it yet, you can watch it later, I would say, because there's not much, you won't be missing much. uh, but I'd suggest start by building. Okay. Okay, let's move on. So before we went on a break, these were some, like, we saw that these things actually get a reference to our HTML elements. And there's one thing that I would like to change, which is changing these few cons to let, so that this could be updated again. Okay, so when you have a const variable, you cannot update it again, but when you have a let variable, you can update the value of it again. And we are going to use something called as timers. So I'm going to create a let timer ID which starts with null. Okay, what is this timer? Well, ideally, as I said, that we want to make this count down, and the way to do it would be to use something called as timers. Okay, so in JavaScript you have this option of uh, kind of timing things. Okay, that's the best way to put it. You can time things, so you can give it a, like, how many seconds you want to count up or count down, and it will do it for you. So we are going to do that, and for that we are creating this variable timer ID. So this would basically hold the interval, oops, comment, hold the interval ID for the timer. So I think this is good enough. Let's move on to the next thing. So let's start with this, initialize the timer with work time. Okay, so what are we going to do here? We say that we are going to work for 25 minutes and break for 5. So, and the first thing that the user will do is work. You don't start with a break, right? You start with work. So let's focus on that. So that is why we are going to initialize the timer with work time. Now we are going to do something called as functions. So what are functions in JavaScript? To explain it very simply, a function is kind of a way to define a repetitive task. Okay, that's the easiest way to put it. Also, you can think of functions as boxes of doing things, right? So when I say a box, the way we had, like, now this is a very bad analogy, but it is an analogy nevertheless. So the way we had div tags which wrapped elements inside, so this is like a section which has multiple things inside it. Similarly, when you define a function, what you're essentially saying is that this is a section of things. Okay, and inside this we will define some stuff. Now what are those some stuff that we are going to define? So let's say we want, I can make this side a bit smaller and focus mainly on JavaScript part. So let's say I want to define that what is my minutes. I can do something like math.floor, and that would be time left divided by 60. So what is this math.floor? So math is an inbuilt library, inbuilt, uh, yeah, I would say an inbuilt library that is available to you. And what it is going to do is, initially time left is undefined. Okay. But when you have, like, let's say 25 minutes, you start with 25 minutes, then you are going to calculate how much time do you have left by dividing it by 60. So if I have 25 minutes left divided by 60, I get this. But if I wrap it in math.floor of 25 by 60, I get 0. Okay, 0 minutes left. What about seconds? Time left modulo 60. Okay, so what should this do? So depending on how much time do I have left, uh oh, for time left, we actually, why did I start with update display? My bad. This would be more like updating the display, right? So update the timer display would be an appropriate thing. We first want to start with work time. So this would be like function of init timer, initialize the timer. And in our case, we would say the time left would actually be the work time that the user has said multiplied by 60. So this should actually help us convert the minutes into seconds. And then we will call the update display. And now in the update display, we are going to do the next bit, which would be to convert the remaining seconds to minutes, and then the seconds that we are left with. Okay, that should make much more sense. What else? Can also make some changes to the display. So minutes display was something that we had got right on top here, which was document.getElement by ID minutes. In that, I want to change the text content to actually be minutes dot to string, converted to a string, and actually at the end of it we should also do a pad start of 2 digits and fill it with 0. The seconds display, we can do the same thing. So text content equals to seconds dot to string dot pad start with 0 and 2 and 0. Okay, and now what else can we do here? Okay, let's see these two in action. Let me call the init timer function and let me call the update display function. Okay, these are two things that I am going to call, actually not even update display. init timer. And let's console log exactly what is happening. So let me first console log in the init timer the time left. And let's pass it the time left. In update display, let's console log the minutes and the seconds. And let's also console log, after this is done, the minutes to display dot text content, which actually don't really need to do. Okay, now let's go over and reload. So init timer is, okay, not minus, that makes it a bit worse. So inside the init timer, how much time do we have left? It says 1500. So this is your 1500 seconds, which gets divided by 60 to give us 25 minutes. Okay. And so right now the minutes.text content is 25 and the seconds text content is 0. Now, once we actually start the countdown, okay, once we actually start the countdown, what will happen is how the time that we have left would kind of, we want it to be reduced. So once it starts going down, so this 25 should become 24 and this would be like 59, then it would still remain 24, then 59 would be 58, 57, up until it reaches 0. Once it reaches 0, then you subtract from minute, from 24 you go down to 23, and then again this should go from 59 to 0. Okay, so I'm going to leave those console logs for a minute, for some time. And now after write this, what else do we want to do? We want to update the, should we update the progress bar or should we start the timer? Actually, let's start the timer. We can update the progress bar later. Okay, so to start the timer, what are we going to do? Let's create another function. Okay, start time. So functions, as I said, it's nothing but a block of code. And as you might have now slowly understood, that you can call a function by whatever, like whatever name you have given, and then in this case we are doing a empty parenthesis. Okay, so this kind of says that, oh, you're calling a function. So here we have called a function. If you have to understand an example of this, let's say if I do a const a equals hello, it says like, and I hit enter, it says undefined. If I write a and hit enter, this is like calling the value of the variable. It's printing the value of the variable. Similarly, if you do with a function, so const a, not const actually, we will use the syntax of function, and function a, which does not take anything. Okay, anything that you put in the brackets is a parameter. So function a, I am saying inside this, uh, console.log hi, and I am going to hit enter. Oh, I need to reload it, clear it, and then hit enter. Okay, so now if I do a and hit enter, it did not actually print the value, it printed the whole function. But if I do a brackets, empty brackets, then it prints out what was inside it. Okay, so you can, this is how you can call a function. Now for a function, you can also pass it something called as parameters. So let's say I have a new function called as b, which takes a parameter called as name. And inside this, we will do console.log hello, comma, and then put a comma again, name. So this name is same as this name. Okay. So now let me do this. Now if I know how to call B, I can do B this. It says hello undefined because I did not pass in a name. But if I do B and then pass the name GHW, hit enter, now you see that it got the name that we had passed inside. So that is the parameters. So that's a very high level basic introduction of functions in general. Again, I feel you learn better when you try it out. So now we know what is a function, we know how to call it, and we know what happens inside it. Okay. And now let's move on to the next bit. So what's the next bit? So the next bit would be actually checking. Okay, checking one thing, which I think we had. Oh, no, we have. So we have a timer ID as null. So we can do something like a conditional check. So till now, what we were doing, we have done a init timer, which is to like creating a function. We have created a function, and inside that we have done some math operations. Then we have called a function. Okay. Then we have seen some more math operations. We have seen some more. Okay, what is this percentage, by the way? So this is kind of getting the remainder. Okay, so quotient and remainder, if you remember like that bit of maths. So the quotient in this case, if let's say the number of seconds that I have left is 1500 and I divide it by 60, so I get 25. What about 1525 and divided by 60, I get 25.41 this. Okay, that's your normal division. If I do a math dot floor and then do, actually let me clear this, math dot floor of 1525 divided by 60 and I get 25. Okay, see the difference. What it did was it rounded it down. Okay, now if this was 1532, yeah, so then it gives 25.533. Math.floor of 1532 gives me 25 still. But there is something called as a math.seal as well. Inside which, if I do exactly this, it gives me 26. It rounds it up. Okay. What about if I do a math.seal on 1525 by 60? It gives me 26. So math.seal, it rounds it up towards the ceiling, and math.floor, it rounds it down towards the floor. Okay, that's the easiest way to understand. So that was some math. Now about the time left divided by modulo 60. So if I do 1532, again, divide by 60, this is what I get. If I do a 1532 modulo, or the percentage sign to 60, so it returns me 32. Okay, what do you think that is? So that is the remainder after the exact division. So we know that if I do 1500 divided by 60, it returns me 25, which is the exact division. Okay. So if I do 01 modulo 60, this will tell me what would be the remainder when you divide this number by 60. So that's your modulo operator. So that's what we are doing. How much you will have left if exact division has completed. And then this text content, we had actually seen this in, I think, second video, that you can actually update what is written on the screen. Okay. So now the next bit is going to be conditions. So let's learn conditions. Before that, actually, there is this. I would say you can watch the third part. That is fine. Like you can continue watching this one, and then you can start again. That's all I can say. So start timer. So let's do conditional checks first in our console. So let's define a few variables. Const a equals 25. Okay. Const b equals 30 and const c equals 35. These are the three variables that we have defined. Now I am going to say if a greater than b, if this is the case, if this is true, okay, that's the way to put it. If this is true, console.log a greater than b. Okay, so that is a condition. Else, if the second condition, if b greater than c, actually b greater than a, right, should go this way. Console.log b greater than a. Else console.log what is happening. Okay, so this returns b greater than a, which is, what is it doing? So this greater than symbol, it is actually checking which one is greater. So we are saying if a greater than b, then do this. If b greater than a, then do this. Else do a what is happening. So when will this what is happening run? So in our case, actually, let's try that out. I'm going to say let a equals 25, let b equals 25, let actually just two numbers. And now if I check our condition and I hit enter, then it goes like what is happening. Okay, why? Because this condition is false. Is a greater than b? Is 25 greater than 25? No. Is, again, b, which is 25, is 25 greater than 25? No. So that is when you go into the last condition, which is like, okay, if none of the above things match, go for this one. So that is why it prints what is happening. Now if I change my a, actually, so now I change a equals to 26, and now if I call my condition, then it goes like a is greater than b. That's the first thing it meant. The first condition that it checked, that was true. So that's a quick overview of what is conditions in JavaScript. So in our case, let's also, oh, one last thing. Let's change a. Let a equals to 25. Let b equals to 25 as well. Now we can also do a comparison inline here. A triple equals b. It returns true. So this is to check if these two things are equal. Okay, exactly equal. If I do a equals b, that is assignment. Okay, so here I am saying that make a same as b. To do that, like, we can actually do that or confirm that by doing a equals 37. And now if I do a equals b and print a becomes 25 and b is also 25. So this is assignment. If I do a equals 25, b equals 37, and if I do a triple equals b, this will be false. 25 and 37 are not equal. If I do a equals 25, now I have assigned a new value, which is 25. So now if I check a triple equals b, oh, sorry, I have to assign b 25. I was like, wait, why? Okay, b equals 25. Now if I check a triple equals b, yes, it is true. What about a greater than b? That is false. A less than b? That is false. Uh, what about a double equals? I keep doing triple equals. So this still becomes true. Okay. A double equals b is still true. Now this is very like a peculiar thing in JavaScript, which is it does something called as converting the type. Let's see that in action very quickly. Let a equals string 25. Okay. So if I print a, there is this string, this inverted comma, single inverted comma around it. Let b equals 25. If I print b, it's like a number, no inverted comma. And you can check the type of this by doing something called as type of. So type of a is string and type of b is number. Okay. So now we have checked what is the type of a and type of b. Now if I do a triple equals b, it says false. Why? Because a string, which is like a word, is not equal to number. But in JavaScript, if you do a double equals b, it says true. So this is called as a loose comparison. Okay. And the idea here is that if the in underlying value is exactly the same, so 25 and 25 visually they are the same. The only difference is one is a string, which is basically in a double inverted or single inverted comma, and one is a number. In that case, can we try and convert the string to a number or a number to a string? If it's possible, and after conversion, they are exactly the same thing, then it becomes true. Now, this would be false if a equals, let's say, double inverted, single inverted, double inverted, anything will work, 43. Now, if I do a double equals b, that is false. Why? Because it's trying to check if a, which is 43, is it equal to b, which is 25? The answer is absolutely not. So yeah, that's kind of a quick caveat slash check. Now coming back to our function, I think we have kind of learned everything that is needed. Now let's start with the first thing, which is timer ID. And if triple equals, also let me change my font ligatures so that it looks exactly how I want it to look, which is 3 equals. If timer ID 3 equals or triple equals null. Okay. So timer ID, we have said that it is actually initially, it starts with null. Here we are checking again that if it is actually null, in that case, timer ID is equal to set interval. Okay. And set interval, it will take in something like this, an empty brackets, and then we are going to call a function. Now this might be a bit tricky to understand for the time being, so just like trust me on this for now. And then we will say uh, decrease the time left by 1 second. Okay. And we'll also call the update display function that we have created here. And after that, if the time left is 0, like when it reaches 0 0, in that case we will do something, or let's say console.log uh, time up. Okay, and right here we can pass a second argument, which is in milliseconds. So 1000 milliseconds is 1 second. So let's see this in action. uh, Also, let me console log the time left. Okay, so to see this in action, we can do let timer id equals null. Okay, which is oh, let timer id 1 equals set interval, and time left, we'll also need to define the time left. We cannot have this function. uh, okay, let me start again. So let time left 1 equals 1500. Okay, and let timer id 1 is this time left 1, time left 1, time left 1, and should do it. And it starts by doing this, and it still keeps saying that time left is 1500. Okay, but at any point if I do a time left 1, as you can see, it keeps on reducing. Okay, so it works, it's not printing right now here. So for the time being, let's actually move on to the next bit, which would be, like, we see that it works, but it's exactly not printing because we are not calling it in a loop. If I take this whole function, can I call this function? Do I have these variables there? Yep, there we go. Much better. So I gave it the whole function and ran it. And as you can see, it actually starts subtracting. And on the screen, you can see it changing. So let's allow it to go down. Yeah, we'll have to wait for it to. Okay, so there you go. You see that it kind of, not kind of, absolutely works. So that's how you know that this whole thing works. Let me reload the page so that it does not keep doing it. What we did was we took the function that we had written on JavaScript file, and I just did a enter right here, and then we called the function. It starts working in the background. Where did it get the variables? That might be one of the questions. Where did it find the timer ID? Because the JavaScript is loaded on this page, these variables exist in its scope. That's how it knows the values of these variables. Okay, so let's get rid of all of this, load, and let's move on. Now that you know that the timer works and how it exactly is working, okay, so let's update the buttons. We can do start button dot disable equals to and pause button dot disable equals 12. Okay? Now in this case, the buttons that we have, these two buttons, once you have started the timer, you cannot click on the start again. That doesn't make sense. So that is why we are going to disable that button. But the pause button will now get enabled. Now let's write the function for pausing the timer. The function pause timer, what should that do? It should basically stop the timer. To do that, it should call something called a clear call, which all it needs is a timer ID. And then we can set the timer ID as null again. So when we do the start timer, that time we actually keep changing the timer ID, right? But when we do a pause timer, we want to switch it to null again. And now, once you have paused something, then the pause button should get disabled and start button should get enabled. So I'm going to say that start button dot disabled equals false and pause button dot disabled equals true. What else? Reset timer. Yeah, that is another thing that we should work on, which would be the reset timer button, where we will say that when we do a reset timer, like let's create a function for that. But in reset timer, what we will do is first call the pause timer function, which pause timer, it actually stops the current execution, right? So that's why we'll call that first, because we want to pause or stop anything that is working right now. Then we will set the is work time equals to true. So if you are in work mode already, that is fine. But if let's say you are in the break mode and you do a reset timer, it should go back to the work mode. Then the status display, you remember this all caps work. So this we want to change to, like, again, let's assume that you are in the break mode. Then this should change to break. But if you do a reset when it is you are in break mode, then it should start back. It should clear anything that was happening, and this should change back to work. So that is why we will do this. And now we will call the init timer, which is to initialize it again. What else? Oh, a switch, right? We need a switch. So const, not const, so function switch mode. So remember me, like right now, I talked about how we want to switch between work and break or work and play. There should be a way to switch that. So currently there is no condition or logic to actually do the switch. So now we'll call the is work time, which was above, and we can toggle. Okay. So the way to toggle is not is work time. So to see this in action, let's say is work equals true. Okay, now not is work is false. But if I now do again not is work, okay, of course it's false. uh, and I assigned this to is work. Okay, so is work is true. I do a not is work, that becomes false. Now I assign this to this and I do a not is work again. So false becomes true again. So what are we saying is not true is false, not false is true, and not true is false again, and not false is true again. Okay, so we are doing the opposite. And if you assign it to the same variable, you are basically creating a switch on off, true false. So is work time is equal to not is work time. So we are toggling. Okay, and now we can create or like update our time left. So if it is time, if it was work time, okay, now this is a condition check. So to understand this, you remember our if condition? Let's do that again. Let a equals 43, let b equals 44. Okay, and we were doing that whole if else check, right? If a greater than b, like this whole thing, then right now it says b greater than a because b is 44, a is 43. Now you could do it in one line by checking b, sorry, a greater than b question mark. In that case, we can print this out. And then you can do a colon saying else b greater than a. Okay. So this is a check. So one line check. You could take away all of this if else and put it here. Now you may have a question like, what about this last condition? How will we achieve that here? This is only checking it once. Let's do that. Now let me redefine a as 43 and let b is 43 as well. Now let's do a check. If a greater than b, if that is true, a greater than b. A big. Else, let's do another check. B greater than a question mark, b big. Else, okay. So this is like the three conditions that were doing in the if else. Okay, the same thing. A greater than b, else check if b is greater than a. Then if it is greater than a, the question mark denotes what to do if it is greater. So then if it is greater, then you do this. Else, this is the final check, or the final thing that would be printed, or final check, the final thing that would be printed. And you can assign this to a variable as well. So in our case, we'll say that the time left, we will do a quick check. If it was work time, if this is true, then work time, else it is break time. And then multiply it by 60. And now we also need to do update the status display dot text content equals is work time. Is it work time? Then in that case, display work, else display play. Okay. And we can, once we have done this, we can call the update display function. What else? The next thing would be, how do you listen to the button clicks? That is important, right? How do you listen to a button click? So there is something called as event listeners. Okay, so you can add a event listener, you can remove event listeners, you can do multiple things. In our case, let me start with, do I have the start button first? Okay, yes, I have the start button, which is focusing on this button. Now in the start button dot add event listener, okay, you can add multiple types of event listeners. Now one of the events that we want to listen to is called as a click event, and if it is a click event, then we want to call the start timer. Okay, this is what I have set. So now if I go and click on this, then it should actually start the timer. I have clicked on it actually. Okay, so that is the click event. So where is this event coming from? Like, who is doing this? Whenever you take a mouse and you try and click on it, okay, that is when you trigger for the click event. Now that exists, or like, it's kind of an API that you get. Example, if you go to MDN docs and you search for click event, okay, and there you go, you can read more about this on the API docs. Ah, thanks. I did not see this before. Should have seen it. So you can read more about these click events. So these are some mouse pointer events. So you also have like double click. I think it's called DBL click. Yeah. So when someone does a double click on this thing, then you can do this. We can actually test that out very quickly. Instead of single click, I can do a DBL click. Okay. And then start timer. I go over here and I try to do a single click. It does not start. Okay, I assure you I did a single click. I don't know how else to like make it sound or something. But now if I do a double click, that should actually start the timer. Okay, so that is about the uh, yeah, some events that you get. So these are all APIs, so we don't have to create them. These are available as part of any website, web browser that exists. Okay, you don't have to create these things on your own. All you need to do is go over to the web API page and check all those things. Now the thing that we did was a mouse event. Okay, so it is a mouse event. uh, Click, because well, you can't click with a keyboard, you do a key press with a keyboard, right? So yeah, you can read more about the events that exist already by going on to the MDN docs. The link is in the chat. So in our case, we want to listen to this click event. Like when someone clicks on the page, we want to listen to that. So that is why we are going to do or add that functionality. We will say that start button dot add event listener. You have multiple types of events, like so many, as we said. So the one that we are interested in is, like, as you can see, these are the event listeners. Copy is one, cut, drag end, so drag and drop, error, focus in, focus out, key down, mouse enter, mouse leave, mouse move, mouse over. Okay, so what happens if I do a mouse over? So you can read more about mouse over by going to MDN and do a mouse over. So mouse over would be when a pointing device such as a mouse or a trackpad is used to move the cursor onto the element or one of its child elements. So in our case, if I don't do a click, oh, there is an error here, but that's okay. If I don't do a click and instead of that, I do a mouse over, that starts the timer. I'm going to just like hover over it. I'm not going to click on it and it starts. Okay, my mouse is on there. I've not clicked it and it starts. So yeah, those are a few things. So the first thing is what is the type of the event. The second one is what to do when that event happens. So in our case, for when someone does a click, then you start the timer. Similarly for pause button, so instead of start button, we will do a pause button. If someone does that, you call the pause timer function. So you might have noticed that normally inside the functions I did this empty parenthesis, but right here I'm not doing that. Do you think it would make a difference? Anyone in the chat, do you think it would make a difference if I do reset timer? Do we have? Yes. Okay, if I do this, I go over here, clear this out, reload. Oh, I don't have to do this. I go over this and click. Why is it not starting? Okay, if I do just a start timer, reload, click, that starts. What do you think, everyone, is the difference? I want your insights. What would be the difference between, like, when I was doing start timer somewhere else or even update display somewhere else, I was calling it with an empty parenthesis. Right here, it's not exactly working. Why? That is, no, you don't have to answer that right now. That is a homework question for you. Oh, another thing that we want to listen to is work time input. So add event listener whenever input box changes. So what we are saying is that this input box, when this changes, we also want to change this thing. Okay, so if you set the work time as like I want to work for only 1 minute, then this display should change to 1 minute, and then when you start the timer, it should do a countdown from 1 minute. So when something changes in an input box, the event type is called as a change event. And now this is interesting. Now the listener is going to have some value. It's not same as a button. Change event is not same as a button. Why? Because when you do a like a mouse click, okay, not change event is not like a button. It's more like a change event is not exactly like a no input box actually carries value, so we want to pass that value. So that value exists on something called as event. And what you could do is, now the work time that we have is, we will say whatever the user has entered. So in an input box, everything is a string. So we first want to change that to an integer. So that is why we do a parse int, which converts the string to a number. So like always, let's do a quick check. If I do let a equals 344 string. Type of a is a string. Okay, and if I print a, it's a string. But now if I do a parse int a and I hit enter, I see 344 without a string. If I do a type of, or actually let me pass this to b. So b equals parse int A and I hit enter. Now type of B is going to be number. Okay. So because this is now become a number. In input, as I said, everything is a string. Even though it looks like a number, we have set the type of input as number. If you remember from that input box, we said the type is number. The value inside is still a string. So we need to change that to a number. That's what we are doing here. And now we are going to say if it is work time. If it is work time, in that case, reset the timer. So you're in work mode and you change the timer, change it. Similarly, like, so what you're saying is, like, let's say you're changing the work time here to more. Now that would get updated. Okay. You're changing it to less, that should get updated. Similarly, we want to do for break. Like right now, if I increase the break time or decrease, nothing well, actually it's not in the break mode, so that is why I don't see it happening. But ideally it wouldn't work. So I can copy paste this whole thing, and instead of work time input, I will say it is a break time input. Dot add event listener, the change event. If the input box value is changing, we'll update the break time to be parse int event.target.value. And if it is not work time, then it basically means that it's a break time. And then we will reset the timer of whatever it is and go over to this. So how can I quickly move over from work time to break time? Is work time false? Oh, we'll have to change it in 3 places. Nah, I am not bothered. Once we actually go into break time, it will be easier uh, to understand. Or actually, if I go, nah, not bothered, frankly. We are nearly done for the work time and break time. And finally, we can do a pause button dot disabled equals to true. Like initially, pause button should not be running, should not be allowed. I'm going to change the work time as 1 and I'm going to click on start. So this should start counting down. Okay. Once that happens, I want a break time of 6 minutes. Okay. So let's check that out if that works out. We'll always have to wait for a minute for this to actually run out, because we haven't added any functionality where we go like, oh, I want to actually work for just 30 seconds, right? Or 10 seconds. So that could be another takeaway, that add the functionality, like improve this timer to actually take in minutes and seconds instead of these whole numbers and then converting those. Okay. So that could be one of the functionalities that you all could work on. Take the timer and convert it into uh, minutes and seconds. Now that this is done, whoops, there is a problem. What's happening with this? Reset works. Start. Okay. Pause. If I click on pause and I am not doing anything, yes, it is paused. And I start again, it should start counting down from there. Okay, that works. Pause works. Reset works. Break time does not work yet. So there is definitely something that I missed out on when I was calculating the break time. Going to remove this console log. Okay. Then update display, that is fine. Math.floor, time left, yep, that is fine. Seconds, that is fine. Removing this console log, not really needed. Seconds display, okay, that is fine. Uh, also don't need these two console logs. This is okay. Start timer starts with null. Set interval. Oh, a shorthand way here would be minus minus, which is same as doing what we were doing. Time left goes, update display. If time left is 0, in that case, oh yeah, we did not switch the mode. All we did was console log. We should switch the mode once the time left is 0. Perfect. So now if I go like 1 and I start the timer, yeah, so there we go. Quick debugging of why would it not actually switch over and why would it go into -1. Okay, so let's wait for this to actually count down to 0. Okay, and there we go. Now we are in the break time and that switches over to play. Okay, you can reduce the break time as well. So if I start reducing it, suddenly it goes like, oh, work first. So that's also something that could be worked on. Now finally we want to update this progress bar. Okay, so let's do that. Let's do that quickly. Okay, right here, let's create a function to update the progress bar. We can do function update progress bar. And now inside this, what we want to do is create a const total time is equal to, if it is work time, in that case, work time multiplied by 60, else if it is break time, then break time multiplied by 60. Okay, that's the first thing. Now we can do a const progress, okay, creating a variable called as progress, where we say if the total time minus the time left, okay, not if, actually total time minus time left divided by the total time multiplied by 100. So we are calculating kind of a percentage here, how much time is left. Now we'll say progress bar, which was something that we have on the top. Okay, getting that particular element. Progress bar dot, you can add a style using JavaScript. So we can do a dot style dot width, okay, is going to be equal to, we can add a percent sign here saying how much this is left. Now this is a special syntax. Normally if you had to do this in string, what you would do before would be progress plus string percent. Okay, so let's see both of them. Progress bar dot style dot background color. If it is work time, then in that case make it green. So 4CAF50, let's say. Else make it blue, which would be 2196F3, let's say. And where will we call this progress bar? We should call it right after we update the display. Okay. Let me go back to 1 minute, and even break time would be like 1 minute. And let me start. So if I start this and that is changing, my progress is not changing. Okay. Which is very interesting. If I do it in line, in a single line, in that case, I do this and actually calculate the percentage. Okay. So 1 minute break, start timer. Interesting. I would have assumed that would work. So Pomodoro progress. So it is changing, but it's just not visible. Now this is very interesting. Okay. Why is that not visible? Or is it just like me? No, it is actually not changing. Uh, let me think. Let me think. Did I not update the CSS? Ah, should add some CSS for this, right? Uh, how do I expect this to work if I'm not actually adding the CSS to fill this? So let me add some CSS for that very quickly. So we know that there is this ID that I could use, progress. So hashtag progress will say that it starts initially with width of 0%, then height of like 100%. So starting empty, setting a height. Initially, the background color would be whatever we set there in the JS, which would be this one that goes here. And we will now do a transition based on the width, and every 0.3 seconds easily it should change. I think that should work out better. Okay, let's see if I change this to 1 and I click on start. Yeah, there we go. There's the green. And now once the counter actually reaches 0, this should switch over to blue. And you can also see the width, like for every second that it goes down, how much percent of this whole thing is like the width of that green line, how much percent is it completing. So 46.666, 48, 50%, 30 seconds, 50%, exact. Like math is correct basically. Okay. And slowly and steadily, this is how much we have completed. And once it reaches like the 10 seconds, let's say, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 0. And that goes into play mode. And now we have 1 minute of play in blue. And I think that's it. If I pause this, okay, you can see that this has stopped changing and everything is paused. And I start it again, it starts right from there. Okay. And I can reset it back to what it was. So that is our Pomodoro timer done, actually. I don't think there is anything else that we want to add right now. This is very good for the first project, which is finally completed. Okay, done. And it should be available on the GitHub. So if you go over there, that should have everything. So it wasn't that big. Maybe it was, if it's a first time doing it, it might look a bit much, but trust me, it wasn't really that much. And now, without wasting any further time, because I want to complete the second one, let's start with the box shadow generator. Now, what are we like? What am I replicating with box shadow? The way we replicated Pomodoro, box shadow generator. Uh, this is what we want to replicate. So you see this, like they do a box color. I change the box color to be, let's say, purple or something, or pink, more like right now. Uh, okay, let's go with, yeah, this one. The shadow color, I want that to be a bit yellow. Okay, or let's say, okay, near about this dark green. How much blur we want? Okay, how much should it spread around? There's that option. Vertically, where should it go? Down or up? So that's one option. uh, Horizontally, where should it go? Left or right? That's another option. So this is what we want to do. And once we are happy with it, if you see inside here, this is the code for doing this exact same thing. Okay, doing this exact same thing, which is like on a box, if you want to add a shadow, if you add this code in your CSS file, it will work out. You can also change the opacity right here. And if you do an inset, it adds it inside. So if I go with like more yellow and I do an inset, as you can see, it actually adds it inside the box or outside. So we want to create something similar to this one, which is a box shadow generator, which should also generate the code for it and show it somewhere on the page. So with that, let's get started. I'm going to remove the nav for now, and we are going to focus solely on doing the box shadow. So what are we going to add in our box shadow? Uh, yeah, we will make this much better looking, much more semantic if we can. So one of the semantic things is actually section. That is a generic, and there is a main as well, the main element. So the main element represents the dominant content of the body of an element. So example, here there is a header called as gecko facts. So there's another thing. Okay, instead of doing a h1, we could do something called as a header. Okay, uh, so you can read all about when to use header, which is kind of your main thing, the main title. The main thing on the page is going to be your header per se. Okay, So like there is a header here which inside which there is a class logo, and let's say there's an article, okay, about beagles. So article, then header there, and then h1 is beagles, okay, because this is the most important part, and then just below the time. So these are two most important parts of this page. So that is the introductory content, or you can also group things inside it. So inside the header you can have a h1 tag, okay, instead of directly using div and h1. So in our case, we can go with header and h1 tag. That this is very important. It is box shadow generator. Now, if you like, I'll tell you this, same as what we have observed in part 1 and part 2, okay, or even in part, yeah, actually part 1 and part 2, that it actually doesn't really matter to the browser most of the times uh, about these semantic elements. If you're using div tag, well and good, works out fine. But using semantics helps the browser understand how your content is structured. So when you try and deploy your website, when the robots try to crawl your website, go through your website, they understand the significance of things. And that is how your website will become more visible on a search engine if it has some things or the other, like, oh, this is the important part of the content, it's more structured, it's more semantic, this is a better website, let's put it above in the search results, part of your, let's say, SEO. So header h1, box shadow generator, I think this is good. We can have, what's the main part of this? The header, is that not a main part? Well, it is. So I can actually take this inside here. Now in the main, I will give it a class called as container. Okay. Now below the, and in the h1, I can give it a class called as, let's say, title. Now below the header, I want the section. So the first section would kind of be a class row 1. Okay. Oh, yes, this will be separate from Pomodoro. Okay. Completely fresh. So you can actually start like right now, coding this right now. So what are we going to do? What we want to do is kind of achieve something very similar, where we have a row. Okay, so this one horizontal thing, one row, and two columns, one column, two column. So we want one row, two columns, and then instead of putting this inside here, inside my box, I would want to put it in the second row. So my first row is going to be like this big. Okay, this whole thing is my first row, which has two columns, one column, two column. And then there would be a second row, like you can think of this as the second row. This is where my code will go. So second row. So section class row 1, and inside this I can have section inside section actually. Okay, and now this is when I miss divs sometimes. And in divs, you don't really need to think about it. Actually, let's inside this, let's go with a div. In the div tag, we'll give it a class name of column 1. Okay, column 1. Now inside this, we can go with a h2, which would be controls. And we can give it a class of section title. Okay, the title of this section is controls. Inside this, I want a dot control dash group, which would create a div with a class of control group. And inside this, we can create a label for what? For horizontal display, which would be horizontal length. So what we are creating right now is this horizontal length. Okay, how much do we want the horizontal length to be? So that's the label, and then we will have a let's also add a span here, because not span to show this. So initially it would be 0 pixel. So span will have a class which would be like value dash display. We can give it an ID of horizontal dash value, and we can wrap this whole thing in a control header. So I'm going to create a div with a control header and take the div 2 levels down. So now, yeah, this is kind of wrapped around. So there's the div, and that inside has a label and a span. And right outside here, I will create a input. Okay, the type would be range. The ID would be horizontal. It matches with the label here. So this matches this ID. The minimum would be like minus 200. That's how minimum you will go. The maximum would be like plus 200, and the value would be like 5. Okay. Okay. So now if I go over to our project, go to Box Shadow Generator, there we go. Okay. So now changing it does not change this right now because there's no functionality, but there's your slider. Okay, minimum, maximum, and changing. And these two are in single line. Perfect. So that ends our first div, I would say, the control group. Let's go over to the next one. We'll create another control group. So since it's a class, we know that we could kind of repeat it. We'll create another control header. We'll have a label. This time it would be called as for like vertical length. Span, give it a class for like value dash display. Give it an ID of like vertical dash value, initially at 0 pixels. And now we'll have another input, type range, ID to match this for, okay, which is vertical. The min and max would be same as before. I'm going to just copy paste that one. Okay, so that's our second control group done. And now this is going to be too much because now you get an idea, right? What we are doing. Okay, we are creating labels, creating some span elements for showing the value, creating a range. And now you have to repeat this so many times. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste it so that we can save our time from doing this. So I'm going to copy paste our control groups a bit. And there we go. So this is our like some of the options that we have. If I compare it with what we have here, horizontal length, vertical length, blur radius, spread radius. Perfect. The next one is shadow color. Now this is going to be interesting. So that is why I did not copy paste that. So the next one is going to be, again, actually a control group and everything would still be there. So let me copy paste it. And we can do an explanation quickly on that. So the next one is color input wrapper. The input type in this case is color, and the ID is color, and there is some initial value that we are giving it. Now the first six, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, these represent the color, and the last two, what do you think that represents? That's for you to answer. If I change that to 70, opacity, yeah, you're nearly right. uh, okay, for the time being, removing that from our mind, uh, you have, okay, so that's your type color, which actually gives you this very nice color picker where you can change the color. Then the next one is input of type range, which is this one. And there we have set the initial value as 25%, and then how much opacity value we have. Okay, so there is that. What else? The next one would be a control group for checkbox. Okay, which is this inset shadow. Should it be inside or outside? So here the input type is checkbox, and there is a label for which wraps around the whole thing, because we want the input to come first, and just next to it should be the inset shadow text. Everything else was like in two different lines. Okay, but in this case it is actually in a single line. So that is why the label is wrapping everything. So that's done. What next? The second column. So this everything was in the first column, column 1, right? So this was div class in column 1. Below this we want the class, not class, dot column underscore underscore 2. So in the second column we can do a bunch of things again. Yeah, we can do this exactly. Okay, so what we have done is created a new div, column 2, given it a class called as like preview, and created a box, but there's nothing inside here. So if, as you can see, if I actually open the inspect element, it exists, but it actually does not exist. So if I go over to the column 2, there is a div, but it does not take any width, and that is why you see that it says it is like 0. Okay, it takes a length, but it takes a width, but it does not take a height. Sorry, it does not take a height. So the height is 0 because it does not actually it exists, but it is not taking any space, which is why the height is 0, but the width is the whole thing. Okay, width into height. Okay, so we have created that empty one, which we will populate by with JavaScript later. So that is our first section done. Now let's create another section, which would be the second row. So I'm going to do a section dot row underscore underscore 2. So that was our first section, that whole thing that we saw. Now let's create a second section, and inside this, actually this one's going to be way simpler. We'll have a single div which would have like class code header, some title to it, and a button which we are giving the ID of copy button, class of copy button, copy. And there would be a pre tag, and you have seen what pre tag does. All it does is, like, it allows you to write things exactly as they should look like. So that is our actually HTML kind of done. Okay, copy button, generated CSS, and this is where the code will come. And yeah, that's our HTML pretty much done. So let me push this much. So you can copy paste it. The way I did it, the way I copied and pasted everything, because in the essence of time, you can do the same. Should be up there. You can actually check it by going on this particular GitHub link. The link is in the chat. Perfect. Let's do the styling. So we know to actually link a style sheet, we do a link, and the relationship is a style sheet. But where is the style sheet? We haven't created it yet. So let me create one. Why does it say I haven't posted? Oh, yeah, true. Let me create one by doing a box dash shadow dot css. Okay, so creating a new CSS file, and we'll say that right here you will find the box shadow dot css. Okay, so in our CSS, let's follow like the way we followed some semantics right here. Let's follow the best practices in CSS as well. Since we are going to reuse the colors again and again, so you can define them as variables in CSS as well. So to do that, you could do dash dash. The way you do const let in JavaScript, you could do a dash 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 primary bg, and you could define that with some colors. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Perfect. So now primary bg is a variable. Okay. Similarly, we can define a bit more like secondary bg, border color, text primary, and a bunch of other things. I'm going to copy paste that thing. So these are all the variables that we have created. Okay. So now in the body, if I want to say the background color, instead of actually writing a hashtag, I can say use this accent color. So I can go like var accent color. Okay. And if I go over to a box shadow, there we go. Very blue, but applied. So that's how you can use variables. You do a var, and in brackets, whatever is the name of the variable, you add that. So even though this is called as text secondary, all it is a color. So you can actually add that as well, and that will work. So the variable naming does not actually mean that it won't be used for something else. You can use it, of course. Okay, I can use text secondary for background color. So yep. But in our case, instead of doing primary bg, sorry, text secondary, I would actually give our background color to the body as secondary bg. This is much better looking. And the color of the text inside here, I want that to actually be text dash primary. Okay. very slight difference right here. And I want the line height to be like 1.5. Okay. Another thing to note, another best practice whenever you start CSS, step one, ensure that you get rid of any margin or padding that is populated by the browser. The browser adds some stuff. Also, when you want to calculate the, like, how much space will this take, does that include the border width or not? These are questions that you might have sometimes. So in our case, we will always say set it to exactly border box. And we can also change the font family. Now, most of the systems actually nowadays come installed with Interfont. If I can find mine. Apparently not, but we can download it. Okay, let's learn how to download it. So we can go over to Google Fonts, and let's say I want a very specific font. I want a calm font. A formal font. Not really. Humanist. I need one very quickly. Okay, let's say this one. I like this font. I want to get this font. We can get a embed code, or you can also go for see how to use to actually understand that. Okay, finally, embed code. We want to use the import tag on the web. So inside our CSS file, right at the top of this, okay, above the root, we can add this import. And now we can use this by doing font family, Jost and Serif. So in all of this, we go for Jost Serif. If I go over to Box Shadow, as you can see, the font has kind of changed, right? Oh, there we go, the problem. This is interesting, but I'm pretty sure the opacity is defined like that. I'll check it in a bit. But if I actually check this, yeah, as you can see, the font here, the third line says, like, first line says h1 dot title, what is the size, then the color, and then the font is Jost. Okay, so that's our font set slash decided. Okay, so we have set some font family for the whole page for all the elements. We have set the body, and now we can move on. Now, even for this, how much time do I have? I have enough time, but since I actually spend a lot of time into ensuring that this looks nice, I am going to do what I did before, which would be copying and pasting nearly everything, and then we'll go over it uh, a bit quickly. Okay, so let's go over the CSS and let's see how it looks like. So this is what it would look like at the end of it. Okay, some like really nice looking thing. So let's go over the CSS very quickly. So container, I'm saying the max width is going to be 1200 pixel. Where is our container? That is the topmost thing. So we're saying this is maximum 1200. Okay, it cannot go beyond this. So if I, let's say, actually do that, the maximum it would be 120 pixels. This is what it would look like squeezed in. Okay, but I'm going for 1200 pixels. Margin 2rem auto, padding top, bottom, and this. Title, setting some font size, font weight, margin bottom, and color. Okay. Section title, row 1. Now this is interesting. Remember display flex box, right? Similarly, you have a display grid. Now let me remember, if there was flexbox froggy, is there something similar for grids? I think there was something called as grid garden, was it? Yeah, there we go. So if you remember flexbox froggy, which we did, there is grid garden. Okay, so if you want to learn more about CSS grids, this is how you can. The link is in the chat. So example, like I'll copy paste what they are saying right here, and there we go. So we are saying that the water needs to be given to the carrots. And you could say where should it start. So currently this is display grid. Template columns is 20%, 20%, 20%, 20%, 20%. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we are dividing it into 5 columns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And rows is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, divided into 5 rows and 5 columns. And the water, it goes to the third column, and first row, third column. Okay, next there is poison. Looks like weed is growing in the corner. So use grid column start to poison them. Okay, so we want this one to move over to this last one. So we could do what we did before, grid column start and go for 5. That should actually take this to 5. Okay, the fifth one, the fifth column. And now you can go over and learn a bit more about it. Okay, so learn more about CSS grids. So in our case, we are using grids for rows and columns. So now I'm saying that I want here 2 columns. Okay, and they are going to take like equal spacing. Okay, I could do something like 50% and 50%, and that should work out as well. So you can read more about 1FR on the CSS grid gardens. Column 1, setting some basics. Border radius is radius large, which is 12 pixels. Radius small is 6 pixels. Medium is 8. Okay, so some standard spacing that I have created. So that goes in control group, control header label. So all these labels, the value, input. And now this is interesting. If you do just input, that goes to a text input. Okay, so just input would go to a text input. But if you go for input and type range, that would specify that for the type of input, which is type range, apply these things. So like, let's say if I remove all of this, that's what it goes down to. If I do like width 100%, that is understandable. Height 6 pixels, that's understandable. Like if I go for, let's say, 20 pixels, okay, so how big do you want this to be? So that's what you are setting. Background color, of course, understandable. Border radius is okay. WebKit appearance none and appearance none. Now this is interesting. So this is so that you can actually change how they look by default. Okay, and now once you have removed their current appearance, like the way they look right now, then you can go down to actually change how they should appear like. So bit of stuff here and there. Then color input wrapper is fine. If you want to specify for type color, what should it look like? So those things, checkbox group, checkbox label, column 2, preview container, the whole box, how it should look like. Remember, it was like empty before. Now it is still empty, but it has something in it. Okay, styled. Okay, it is style now. There is some style that we have added. So that's done. uh, Row 2, okay, code header, copy button, the whole code where it would come. And this is interesting, this is the last bit, which actually I would avoid for now because less time, but that is for responsiveness. So if I add before again, actually, I try to make it responsive, what it says is when the width of the screen, okay, and the best way to visualize it is look at this. Currently, the width of the screen is 1318. Now, if you start reducing it, we have written code such a way that this is called as media query. We are saying that if it goes below 768, in that case, change row 1 to be like in a single line. Don't have like two rows, and put everything in a single row. Sorry, don't have two columns, put everything in a single column. Okay. So that's what's happening at 768. It is 769, sorry, it would be fine. 768, as soon as you reach or below, it should go all into one single column. So this makes our design responsive. And you can read, and how do you know like the 768 is the perfect thing? So you can read about it in uh, CSS media create or breakpoints, I think it's called. Yeah. So extra small devices in portrait mode, so large phones, medium devices, this and this. Okay. So you can read more about these breakpoints on where should you actually put it. So that's the media query. So let me push the CSS as well. What did I change here? Oh, I added the CSS file. Okay, so CSS done, HTML done, and now comes the JavaScript. Tailwind also uses these breakpoints. Yes, that is true. So to just for adding JavaScript, not to JavaScript, adding JavaScript, we know that in the body, we need to add a script tag. We need to specify the source, and for that, we will actually create one, which would be box-shadow.js. Okay. So I'm going to say from the current one, go over to box-shadow.js. Perfect. Now, what about the JavaScript for this? So we have a lot of elements on the page, which we'll have to target. I have 7 minutes left. So will I be able to write it down? I don't think so. So I am going to again copy paste this. This is very similar to what we did in Pomodoro, which was focusing on uh, different IDs. So all the IDs are in the HTML. That's what we are focusing on getting. And then some more actually. Okay. Then what else? Need a function to change the shadow. We need a function for clicking on the copy button. Uh, what else? I think there would be a lot of these, which wouldn't be completed very quickly. I don't want to start it and then leave it. So what are we going to do is we are going to pause right here. Let me push this. Okay, so I've pushed what we have till now. What we do have is not much. There is this error, but I am sure that you could specify opacity like this. So I'm very confused why it wouldn't work. Unless I actually misread it. Hmm. Nope, I think I'm right. As you can notice here, uh 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So yeah, the last two digits opacity, I think I'm correct. I have no idea why browser is not liking it. Anyways, I'll leave that warning as it is. Let's check it out later. Hmm. Okay. Anyways, coming back on stream. So, any questions so far, anyone, or anything? From the looks wise, I would say the way to learn the CSS aspect of it would be to go over the CSS file that is there and commenting out things. Okay, adding stuff, removing stuff to see exactly what does it affect. Once you know that, it would be very easy to understand what is happening. uh, this took me a lot of time to write, a lot of googling to do, but I was able to, just by searching how do I add shadow to things, how do I add uh, something else, how do I target a range slider was very difficult, because whatever I would do, it would still have the old one. So I had to go through Stack Overflow a lot to actually understand, oh, you have to first switch off the appearance of the existing. Okay, so once we actually add JavaScript, there is this box that you see, there would be shadow behind this. Okay, so that is what we were going to focus on in our next and actually final session for this. Uh, yeah, next and final session. And also, I will push at some point, I'll push some code of library.html and library.css. Uh, I'll explain it tomorrow's session, and then we'll do the JavaScript together. Okay. So, well, with that, if there are no further questions, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Appreciate all the support that you all give in the chats. And I will see you in the next and the final session, which is tomorrow. Okay. I mean, depending on time zone, please check the time zone, check the timing, and yeah, you'll have a better idea of when you have to join. And after this, you are going to join Jocelyn for scribble.io, a mini event where you can have some fun. So take off the stress, have a very relaxed environment, and just enjoy. Okay. So bye bye, everyone. Cheers. Have a good night to those who have a good night, and good morning to others. Good afternoon. Bye bye.